Well, since we're doing preliminaries, I wanted to begin with my title overlay image. This is from the ESA DLR Mars Express website. This is a section of the Melis Candor Ophir Chasmas in perspective image. I'm not going to do this in any great detail because there's something else I want to discuss since we're dealing with preliminaries for the series. But we have a true junk pile here. We have an obvious portrait in landscape. The portrait is bounded by an iron wall. And bear in mind that this extends probably over kilometers. This is a very large image. And therefore, this is a very large wall. It is unbelievably massive. And we'll come back to that in a moment. We have a flying craft parked next to it. There's another flying craft parked here. There's probably a third here. Probably a fourth here. Whether this is a craft or not, I don't know, but there may be others. And you notice that there's something protruding from the mouth. So we have a mouth, nose, we have an eye. There's an eyebrow, there's the iris, there's the pupil, the lower lid. The figure seems to be holding something in a hand. I don't know what this is, but there's material that comes down, and there's a large metal ring, and you can see features on this metal ring. This is a very large object. There are many faces, but I'll point out just this one, since this is the easiest one to see. This is the face of an alien. See eyes, nose, mouth. And you can search for the other images at your leisure. Now, the main reason I wanted to begin with this is this wall. It is very, very large. And it even appears to have an eye, nostril, and mouth, sort of a representing, I suppose, sort of a horse-like creature, and there may even be a back leg here. I don't know if it's supposed to represent a horse or a dog, but look at the width of this compared to this flying craft. This is very, very thick, and it extends back. This must have a weight or a mass of many thousands of kilograms. Which means that it had to be, the iron had to be mined, had to be smelted, forged, because this wall didn't just appear out of the landscape naturally. This was built. This is a constructed object. It continues on around to the other side of the face. Here there's a bifurcation, and there's something down in here. I don't know what this is. And there's other stuff down in here. We are given these figures from Mars' atmosphere. So we have nearly 96% carbon dioxide, quite a hefty trace of carbon monoxide. And just a trace of oxygen. On Earth, we have 21% oxygen, and we're able to run our foundries. We went from the Copper Age or Bronze Age to the Iron Age. We made progress because we were able to make hotter and hotter fires, and yet this tells us that nothing will burn in Mars' atmosphere. So, how did they manufacture this iron wall? How do they manufacture flying craft? And some of them are iron. We'll see pictures of those later. Anyway, we're given a mean surface pressure at Mars mean radius of 0.6 kilopascals. Slightly better than that, 0.636. And I'll leave these here. I'm going to run down some figures. We have an average temperature of minus 63 degrees Celsius. Temperature range minus 125 Celsius, which is minus 193 Fahrenheit, to 25 degrees Celsius, or 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And the diurnal temperature range at the Viking 1 lander site was minus 89 degrees Celsius to minus 31 degrees Celsius. We're told that solar irradiance is 43% that of Earth. And the surface pressure is variable between 4 and 8.7 millibars. That depends on the seasons. And at the Viking 1 lander site, the pressure varied between 6.9 millibars and 9 millibars. Come from the Mars Facts website. Now, the reason pressure is important is that liquid water can't exist if the pressure is below 611.73 pascals, so lower than the mean average surface atmospheric pressure of 0.636 kilopascals. Now, why is that important? Well, because liquid water can't exist. If you have frozen water ice and the temperature rises above freezing, it goes directly to water vapor. Now, why is that important? Well, here's one image, for example. We have a pool of water on the left, and this is probably water in the background. The images that we're going to be looking at contain water, a lot of water, and there's a YouTube video called Mars Anomalies, Water Plants Life. And they show many bodies of water. So they're not scarce, they're not rare. And that calls into question the pressure figures that NASA has given us, because the water exists, and therefore the pressure must be greater than what NASA is stating. Now, Curiosity landed in August of 2012. And Space.com published this article. And there were air temperatures as high as 43 degrees Fahrenheit. And this, bear in mind, was late winter. Spring hadn't even come to the landing site yet. Now, Curiosity landed at a place called Aeolis Palace, and traveled around. You saw in the introduction that it went to the boneyard at a place called Rock Nest a month ago. We're told that Curiosity arrived at Mount Sharp. There was a period of downtime that lasted at least for several weeks on quite a long journey, and it has since arrived at Mount Sharp, and that's where we're going to pick up in the next part of our series, and we're going to see some really astounding things. So we'll pick it up with a brief comment on NASA's hand at work, and we'll look at two scale images which call NASA's scale markings into question. But those images also contain inherently interesting things which perhaps NASA didn't intend to release. Here we have a white balance image of a section of the upper ridge of Mount Sharp. I call this NASA's hand at work. If you look carefully, you'll see a magenta artifact that runs parallel to the ridgeline. And below that, there's a light blue band that also runs parallel to the ridgeline, between the ridgeline and the magenta artifact. Someone at NASA took the paintbrush tool and they did a sloppy match of the sky color. It's the wrong color, it's a lighter blue, and they went and painted out everything along the top of this ridgeline and removed it, whatever was there. Towers, spires, buildings, evidence of a city, flying craft. Whatever was there is gone. Well, we have a 2-kilometer scale marking, and we have an image with a lot of stuff in it that can be measured against this. So we're going to begin with the forms in the water, and we'll check out the entire image. Notice we have a swimming creature. You can see the eyes. There's a creature here and here. There are two. You can see a pair of eyes here, here. You can see that there's a form here. There's another form here. And there are other forms in the water, but when we come back here, you can see this right here. There's another creature here. There's another one here. Another one here. This looks like a craft. And right here, seems to be a craft parked on an angle. and you can see a bit of shadow beneath it. And we have a form on top of the ridge up here, which looks artificial, but it may be a creature. There's a form here to be metallic, and there's another form here which disappears into this mound, which is, I believe it's more than a mound. There are sun rings here feeding on something, and you can see organic forms. There's an undulating form here. We have a creature here, small one here. This one is lifted up. The front of his body is lifted up, and he's getting ready to grab something within striking range. We got a creature here. You can see the legs under it. Got a creature here. There's another small one here. And we've got these creatures. There are two of them side by side with body segments made of spheres. We've got this large guy here. Got an alien looking thing here. We'll take a look at those a little closer in a moment. Got something here. Something here. It's probably the mouth. There's a creature here. There's the eye. And another creature beside him. Something else right here. Now, we've got two creatures here. I don't know where this ends exactly, but you can see body segments. There's the head. And right beside him, there's another one. Can't see the rest of the body, but there's the head. Then up here, you can see body segments. There's a creature here. There's one here. There's one here. One here. And then this is probably the end of another one. We can't see the whole body. This looks like the end of a separate creature. And then this is the end of a very long creature. Take the snout here. And there's another, at least one creature alongside him. You can see a body here. But this creature right here, if that scale marking is correct, measuring from here to the tip of the snout, that's about 1,150 meters, 3,770 odd feet, if you believe that this is 2 kilometers. Got another creature here. You can see the eye. There are centipede creatures in this image. They're very difficult to see, but there are a lot of them. There are some in here. There are some here. But there's one here that's easier to see than the others. There's another one right beside him. There's another large one right here. You can see the head. There's one on an angle. You can see the head. And on either side of the body, you can see that there are feet here and here. I'm not going to try to count them. There are too many. You notice that we have an object here. We have 2 large sun rings, and there appear to be 2 trefoil creatures, similar to sun rings. They're also scavengers. This looks like an entrance, a tunnel entrance into Mount Sharp. Here we have a craft parked back end in, partially hidden by this outcrop. We have another craft here, also parked back end in and hidden here, and we can see a bit of shadow. There's another object here. We can see shadow beneath it. Now, we have an alien-looking creature here. We've got a very large creature here. We have two really large creatures. There's one here, and there's one here. This one appears to be dead because there are things that appear to be feeding on it. There's a multi-legged creature here, but this one doesn't have anything feeding on it. And in fact, he seems to be eating something. Now, let's take a closer look at these guys. This is about as large as we can get. We have a streamlined body, mouth. This looks like the port in a cell. The eyes are on these stalks. There's one here, there's a stalk here, and it seems to have 3 sections. Whether it has 1 eye or 3 eyes, I don't know, on each stalk. But this guy, we have this large shell. And he's also got a large head. And you see these fleshy protuberances. Here's his eye. And there's something here that kind of interferes with the image. I don't know what this is. And there's also a sphere here, and I don't know what that's all about. You can see that there's something that comes up here. But if we measure from here to here, this creature is 348 meters. That's 1,141 feet. And to my mind, that seems excessive. So I'll leave it to you to decide whether you think this is reasonable. In my opinion, I think this is more like 30 meters. And that would give us a length of, for this creature, of about 17 feet. And the long creature in the water that we measured would come out to about 17.5 meters, 56 to 57 feet, which is still a sizable animal. But these figures are more comfortable. So, is this 30 meters? Is it 2 kilometers? That's for you to decide. NASA released this image of the foothills of Mount Sharp with a 100-meter scale marking. And I think we can challenge the accuracy of this marking. These white dots mark a line separating 2 different types of geology according to the picture caption, but that won't interest us here. What we're interested in are creatures in the water, creatures on the margin here. There's a group here on land. There are other creatures down here that we'll take a look at. And there's a very interesting section right here that kind of disappears into the hillside because of the coloring. Now this is a white balance image. You can see that the blue content in the foreground especially has been oversaturated. But let's begin with this section right here. You can see a creature here, cross between a flounder and a skate, except that it's on land. Eyes on one side of its body. This is a gonzo, and you can see his corkscrew feeding tube or killing tube wrapped around a long, narrow creature. And we'll see a better representation of this in another video that is coming up. This is a portion of an agrofish. They surge out of the water at the water's edge, trying to catch whatever they can. And if you believe the 100-meter marking, from the tip of its nose to this point is 275 feet. It's almost 84 meters. Now, if you look carefully, right here, there's a Martian alligator. It has a long, rounded, tubular snout. There's another one here. His mouth open, eyes on top of his head. Kind of reminds me of Albert in the old Pogo cartoons. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but you can Google it. Here is another agrofish. In the jaws, there's a lower jaw, and there's an upper jaw. This agrofish has been caught by a creature whose body extends out into the water, and the top of his head is here. There's his eyes. There's an upper jaw. And there's his lower jaw. So this guy is going to be eaten by something even more ferocious than he is. We've got segmented bodies, portions of segmented bodies in other areas. Now, right up here, there's another creature, and we want to take a look at that. You can see the long, narrow snout here. Here are the two eyes. We can only see the dark spot of the right eye here, and it extends back. The body ends about here. If we measure from there to the tip of the snout, we find that it's 280 meters, or 918 feet, measured against that 100-meter marking. And the head, you'll notice, is resting on another object. I don't know what this is. We've got something here, and notice that there's a little connection with this. So what's going on here? I don't know. Got a round thing here with spokes, but I don't think this is a sun ring. And you can see more body segments here. There are more body segments here and here. Now moving over to the right, we have a very large creature here, and it is unmistakable. This is possibly another here, although it would be a different species. But this image is somewhat peculiar because it's got markings that are just about parallel to the bottom of the picture frame. And there may be symbols. For example, there's a symbol that looks like a W here. So perhaps this is a sculpture of some sort. I don't know. You'll notice a lot of other little forms in this image. And then over here, there's quite a bit going on. And at first sight, it seems that this creature is rounding a bend here, intent on running down lunch. And that may be what's going on in this creature's mind, but this is not what it appears to be, and we're going to take a closer look at that in a moment. But if you believe the 100-meter marking, let me enlarge this a bit. If we measure from here to about here, and then back to some estimate of where the body ends, we get a length of just about 200 meters. Now continuing, looking at this collection, we have a form here that disappears behind this form. And if you believe that 100-meter marking, then measuring from the tail to about here, this is just about 100 meters, or 328 feet. We have two forms in the front that kind of resemble insects. They remind me of grasshoppers, except they don't have the legs that stick up. There's a form here. It has a second stage, and it has a third stage. And the third stage has fingers or little projections around it. It's kind of a sprocket-shaped piece, and coming directly vertically out of that sprocket-shaped piece, we find this vertical thing. The top ends in a dark spot. It's kind of like a periscope, but this shaft comes up. There's a bulge here, and then the top is a different color from the bottom half. The top half is kind of a white or gray, and the bottom half has this magenta coloring. This is auto-tone, auto-contrast. Now, let me enlarge this. There's a coil here. There are 3 sections to this coil. You can see. And then coming from the coil, there's a large pipe with a right angle bend. And notice all the gold coloring. Here, there's a somewhat spherical form, but it's not really spherical. There's a section of a large sphere here, and then the 2 sides are sections of smaller spheres pushed against it. That's the form that this object takes. It's purplish, and it has 2 projections like antennae or something. And that's right above the coil. So what's going on here? I don't know. Does this represent fuel transfer? Is this a fueling station? Are these craft of some sort? I don't know. But over here, we have an object. This object is darker than any other object in the entire image, the entire original image. And there's a halo around it, it would appear. And it seems to be casting light. Something seems to be casting light. And there are Martians. One here, one here, one here, one here. And there's a Martian partially eclipsing the view of the end of the object here. There's a head, there's a body. You notice that this object is above the ground, as if it's just hovering here. Now also in this image, there's a creature here. You can see that it has legs. There's the right rear, right front, left rear. There's a neck, the head, and there's another creature down here. There's the neck, and there's the head. And there's also a regular object here, which is square or rectangular, a circular cutout, and the edges have cutouts. This is clearly manufactured. And as for this thing, there appears to be something else. I don't know if this is part of it or something attached to it. And there appears to be something here. There seems to be some sort of material that interferes with the image. You see more of it down here, kind of a wispy kind of material. There's a centipede-like creature here. There's the head. There's another large one here. And there's the head. And you can see the segmented bodies, and you can see that they kind of disrupt the image. But if you look carefully, you can see legs along the sides of segmented bodies. You can see the segments. You can see segments here. These things are apparently very numerous. Now also in this image, there's a flying craft here. This is the kind of craft that they stand in. There's probably a second one here. You see that three-dimensional part in the front like this. This may be another smaller one. And if you watch the introduction, in the city there was a feature like this. Almost looks like a balloon mounted on an upright. No idea what these things are. See another form here. But up here, there's a group of Martians. And this is another flying craft up here. These are dressed in green. And these are dressed, I guess that's a light violet. And this is just below the scale marking. Here is the final section. This is auto-tone, auto-contrast. And I said that this disappeared into the hillside. This is the original coloring. And you can see the flying craft here. And this is another one of those flying craft. This is distinct from the ones that we were just looking at. Notice too that there's a cylindrical object here. There's another cylindrical object that comes here, like this. There's an object here. I don't know what this is, but you can see that there's definitely a form. And we have this long light-colored object. Now at first I thought that this might be a craft in itself, But we have a metallic form here. We have another form here. And I thought perhaps these were cockpit windows and portholes. But this craft here is not all that large. And if you look, there may even be people standing in this, because we have what appear to be dark uniforms and heads. And down here, there are two Martians here, and another one here. We have a head, the dark top, gray bottom. There are two here, low cut, dark top, gray pants. It's the head. Here is a gray, normal head, not the extended, elongated head. So there's a gray and a Martian standing right here. So this is not a craft. Whatever this form is, you can gauge its size by the size of the Martians that are standing here. And they are looking over here. And there appears to be a procession of Martians heading toward. Now, if you look carefully, there's another group here dressed in green, and they are consistent in scale with the others that we have seen. Now, I said that we would be able to challenge the accuracy of this marking, so I want to do a quick recap. We have a row of Martians, probably 4 here, and you can count these, come up with an estimate. And we also have this flying craft here that they stand in. And if we assign a length to this, say 4 meters, and if we measure this length and measure this length and take the proportion, we find that this is about 38% of the length of this black marking. And again, we have an object levitating. There are only 4 Martians here. There's one hanging on this edge, and his arms are hanging over the top of it, and he may even have his legs dangling beneath it. But we can estimate from, say, here to here, and we can assign a length to this, anything reasonable, 3.5 meters perhaps. And when we do the proportions, we find this marking is too large by a factor of roughly 10. Now the implications of that are that this creature, which is still of a considerable length, instead of 280 meters, perhaps 28 meters. And similarly, we measured this distance. Bear in mind, the entire length of the fish is going to be 3 or 4 times this length. So we get perhaps, say from here to here, roughly 10.5 meters. An overall length, perhaps 31 or 32 meters. This creature, instead of 200 meters, perhaps 25 meters, perhaps only 20 meters. Bear in mind, 20 meters, we're still talking 66 feet. That's still considerable. So the conclusion is that I don't believe that this scale marking is correct. I think this is way off. But as usual, it's up to you to decide.